It's a warm evening in late June 1995 in Seoul district, on the affluent, fast-growing south side of Seoul. It's a Thursday, just before 6 in the evening, and the Sampoong department store is doing what department stores do at that hour, full of after-work shoppers, families picking up dinner, staff working the registers on 5 packed floors above a basement level, roughly 1,500 people in the building in total. Above them, on the store's top floor, cracks that started appearing months earlier have been getting worse all day. Around 4 that afternoon, an engineer called in to look at them recommended closing the building immediately. Store management doesn't do that. They close off part of the top floor and quietly begin moving valuable stock to the basement. Everyone else keeps shopping. At around 5:50, staff finally sound an alarm. It comes only minutes too late. The roof over the 5th floor gives way first, and 3 enormous air conditioning units mounted on it crash down onto a floor already too weak to hold them. What happens next takes less time than it will take you to read this sentence aloud. The 5th floor collapses onto the 4th. The 4th takes out the 3rd. The 3rd takes out the 2nd, and in under 20 seconds, 5 floors of a modern department store are lying in the basement, roughly 10 meters of rubble where a building used to be. By the time rescue crews finish, months later, the toll will stand as the deadliest peacetime building disaster in South Korea's history, and, at the time, one of the deadliest structural collapses anywhere in the world outside of war or earthquake. To understand how a 5-year-old building, in one of Seoul's wealthiest districts, came down that fast, the story has to start almost a decade earlier, not with an earthquake or a bomb, or an act of God, but with a landfill site, a set of blueprints, and a decision to change them. The site itself has a past. Reclaimed land, formerly used as landfill in Seoul district, part of the Gangnam area, then in the middle of a building boom that was turning rice paddies and low-rise neighborhoods into one of Asia's wealthiest urban districts. In 1987, the Sampoong Group, a South Korean conglomerate with roots in construction and food distribution, breaks ground there on what the earliest plans describe as a modest 4-story building. What isn't in dispute is what the plan became. Before construction is finished, Sampoong Group's chairman, Joon, decides the building should be a 5-story department store instead, bigger, taller, and built to draw retail traffic in a district about to be full of people with money to spend. That decision requires structural changes the original contractor, Woosung Construction, refuses to make. Woosung is fired. Joon has an in-house construction arm of his own conglomerate finish the building instead, cutting out the one party in the process whose job it was to say no. The changes that follow are not cosmetic. To connect the shopping floors the way a modern department store needs to, escalators are cut straight through what were supposed to be structural columns. The columns themselves shrink, specified at roughly 80 centimeters in diameter with 16 steel reinforcing bars. They are built instead at around 60 centimeters with 8 bars, half the steel, holding up more floor than originally planned, because the spacing between columns is also stretched to around 11 meters to maximize open retail space. And the top floor changes too. What was drawn as a roller skating rink becomes a floor of Korean restaurants instead, which means a heated ondol floor system, a thick layer of concrete far heavier than a skating rink's floor would have needed, sitting on a structure that was never engineered to carry it, on columns that no longer line up cleanly with the columns below them. Construction finishes in late 1989. The Sampoong department store opens to the public on July 7, 1990. For 5 years, it operates as one of Seoul district's busiest retail landmarks, the building's problems invisible for now to the customers filling it every day. The mechanism investigators would later reconstruct starts, like so many structural failures on this channel, with something almost mundane. In 1993, residents near the store complain about the noise from 3 large air conditioning units on the roof, each one weighing around 15 tons even empty. Rather than having them properly relocated, maintenance staff simply drag the units across the roof to a quieter spot. Dragging 15-ton machinery across a flat concrete roof does what it sounds like it would do. It puts sustained, uneven load directly onto the roof slab, concentrated right over one column in the store's southern wing, a column engineers would come to refer to by its position on the building's structural grid, column 5E. For nearly 2 years that stress does its slow work, unnoticed or ignored. Structural engineers who examine the wreckage afterward identify the failure that finally let go as punching shear, A specific way flat slab concrete construction fails when a column simply punches straight through the floor slab around it, rather than the slab and column failing together the way a beam and column frame would. Sampoong's flat slab design, without the cross beams that might have given the structure another way to carry a failing column's load, had exactly one path for weight to travel, straight down, through columns exactly like 5E. By April of 1995, that path is visibly failing. Cracks appear in the ceiling of the store's 5th floor, in the south wing, near the air conditioning unit's new position. Management's response is to patch the cracks and quietly move merchandise out of the area, not to investigate why a 5-year-old building's ceiling was cracking. The cracks keep spreading. On the morning of June 29th, the pace changes. Store staff notice new structural irregularities before the store even opens. By mid-morning, the cracks around column 5E have widened dramatically. Investigators would later describe some as having grown to around 10 centimeters across. Structural engineers are called in. By roughly 4 that afternoon, at least one of them recommends the building be closed immediately. Sampoong's management doesn't evacuate. They close off the affected section of the top floor, shift merchandise to the basement, and keep the rest of the store open through the evening rush, reportedly with executives choosing to leave the building themselves before ordering any wider evacuation of the customers and staff still inside. The alarm doesn't sound until around 5:50 that evening. Minutes later, the roof over the weakened 5th floor gives way. The air conditioning units come down onto a floor that can no longer hold them, and the punching shear failure that had been building at column 5E for 2 years finally propagates, floor through floor through floor, in under 20 seconds, down into the basement. By the time the site is finally cleared, the confirmed toll stands at 502 dead and 937 injured, though a handful of retrospectives and engineering postmortems cite 501 dead instead. This script uses the figure most consistently reported across South Korean government, news, and encyclopedic sources. More than half of the dead are the store's own employees. Roughly 1,500 people had been inside when the building came down. Hundreds are pulled from the rubble alive in the days that follow, some after remarkable stretches buried in the wreckage. The last survivor recovered somewhere between 16 and 17 days after the collapse, depending on the account. No individual survivor is named in this script, in line with the channel's compliance rule. Several of their stories are extensively documented elsewhere, for viewers who want to read further. Unlike a collapse triggered by a single accident nobody could have foreseen, the record on Sampoong reads less like bad luck and more like a paper trail. A government special investigation committee, formed after the collapse, laid the cause squarely on years of decisions. Design changes made without proper engineering review, construction quality nobody was independently checking, and a persistent failure of inspection, maintenance, and administrative oversight. At the center of it is Joon, chairman of Sampoong Group, fired the contractor that refused to build it that way, and had his own construction arm finish the job instead. Joon is convicted of criminal negligence resulting in death and sentenced to 10 years and 6 months in prison, later reduced to 7 years and 6 months on appeal. He is released and dies a few months later on October 4, 2003. His son, Lee Han-sang, president of the department store itself, is convicted of corruption and of occupational negligence resulting in death and sentenced to 7 years. He's released in 2002 and later works as an evangelist in Mongolia, according to press accounts. The accountability doesn't stop at the family running the company. South Korean prosecutors indict more than 20 people in total, including Sampoong executives and the city and district officials who took bribes to approve the building's repeated design deviations, among them a rooftop addition and the very column changes that weakened the structure. 12 Seoul area officials are convicted on bribery charges in connection with the case, with sentences ranging from 8 months to 10 years. 2 are named consistently enough across the sources used for this script to name here. Hwang Chol-min, a former head of the Seoul district office, convicted of accepting roughly 12 million won from Joon and sentenced to 10 years. And Lee Chung-woo, a Seoul district administrator, sentenced to 3 years on related bribery charges. In the years after the trials, Sampoong Group and its insurers pay out roughly 375.8 billion won, on the order of $300 million at the time, across more than 3,200 settled claims, with the last payments completed by 2003. Sampoong Group itself does not survive the disaster. The company that built the store ceases to exist. A landfill site. A four-story plan turned into five. A fired contractor. A shrunk column. A floor built for skates that ended up carrying restaurant kitchens. And, eventually, 3 15-ton air conditioners. It was never designed to hold. None of it, on its own, brings a building down. Put together on a punching shear column with nowhere else to send the load, it took less than 20 seconds. The disaster reshaped how South Korea prepares for and responds to catastrophic emergencies, coming, as national retrospectives note, only 8 months after another major structural failure had already shaken public confidence. It pushed the country toward the disaster management and emergency response systems it uses today, and toward building safety reforms requiring independent structural review of design changes like the ones that were never properly checked at Sampoong. Structural engineers still study column 5E as a textbook case of what happens when a flat slab building has exactly one load path and that path fails. Bereaved families still gather every year at a 12-meter marble memorial in Yangjae Citizens Forest, a few kilometers from where the store once stood, funded, in the end, by Sampoong Group itself. The site of the collapse stayed empty for years afterward before a high-rise residential tower went up in its place in the early 2000s. A separate proposal to build a memorial on the actual footprint of the collapse was turned down, with residents and officials judging the land too valuable for it. Families are still, by recent reporting, hoping for one. Structural failure tells one collapse at a time, from the investigation records and the engineering behind them. Subscribe for the next one.